Good evening, everybody, and thank you for joining us at this regular meeting of the Madera City Council. If we can have roll call, please.
Mayor
Here.
Sorry about that. Mayor Andy Medellin.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Foley Gallegos. Here. Councilmember Rodriguez.
Here.
Councilmember Holly.
Present.
Councilmember Robinson.
Present.
Councilmember Oliver.
Here.
Councilmember Rigby. Absent.
Thank you, Claudia, and thank you for filling in this evening as our recording secretary. With us this evening, everybody, from Yosemite Christian Center, we have Pastor Tim McGraw, who will be giving the invocation. So if you will stand with me, please.
Lord, I thank you for our city. I ask you to bless it. Thank you for all of our leaders. I ask, Lord, that you'd bring new levels of prosperity over business. I thank you for our government, our county, our city, our schools, our churches, our police, our fire. Pray that you would bring us to new levels of cooperation as we serve the greater good for our people. I ask, Lord, that you would bring hope to those that have lost it. Help people recover their dreams. I ask you to speak blessing and life over our city. Thank you for this night. Give wisdom and a sense of justice in how we conduct business. Bless each person that's leading and all the action and decisions that need to be made tonight. We ask for your input, your grace, and thank you for it. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you so much, Pastor. If you'll join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Ready, salute. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. The first 15 minutes of the meeting are reserved for members of the public to address the council on items which are within the subject matter jurisdiction of the council. Speakers shall be limited to 3 minutes, and speakers will be asked to identify themselves and state the subject of their comment. If the subject is an item on the agenda, the mayor has the option of asking the speaker to hold the comment until that item is called. Comments on items listed as a public hearing on the agenda should be held until the hearing is opened. The council is prohibited by law from taking any action on matters discussed that are not on the agenda, and no adverse conclusion should be drawn if the council does not respond to public comment at this time. Is there anybody wishing to speak under this definition of public comment? Good to see you, Mr. Kahn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. Bobby Kahn, Madera County Economic Development Commission. I just wanted to come before you today to remind you of the Pacific Gas and Electric Economic Development Incentive Rate that's been in the offerings for the last several years. That rate is is becoming due to expire at the end of this year, and will go away if we don't get an extension from the PCUP. I think that the mayor should have received a letter from Mayor Brand's office requesting a letter of support. Mm-hmm. If you don't have it handy, we can send you another one, or I can forward one to you. But we would certainly encourage the council to put a record on file with the CPUC, requesting that they extend the PG&E economic incentive rate. What I'd also like is to request that a council member or two, or how many ever, or staff people from the city, whatever is deemed appropriate, attend one of 4 public hearings that are going to be held. There's going to be two on August 14th, Monday, the August 14th in Bakersfield, California. The first one will be held at 2 p.m. and the second one will be held at 6 p.m. The locations for these meetings have not been disclosed, but I'll make sure I get it to Sonia or the appropriate folks. The second 2 meetings will be held Wednesday, August 16th in Stockton at the same times, 2 and 6 p.m. And we're encouraging as many people as possible to attend these and give brief testimony to the CPUC so they can see that the support is there, that they hear the message that this is something that the San Joaquin Valley needs. California is a very high energy rate area, some of the highest rates in California. It's a big deterrent when we're out there trying to recruit businesses into our area. So with that, I just encourage you to send a letter and attend and help support this effort, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Bobby. I appreciate it. I'll get together with you to make sure that that letter gets signed and sent off. And I also appreciate what Mayor Brand is doing in gathering up leaders throughout the valley to show support in numbers. So I know I'm slated to go to one of those two meetings and show support and give testimony.
Great. We appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bobby. Is there anybody else wishing to speak under public comment? Seeing none, I will close public comment and move on to the next item, which, if I can ask my colleagues, item C1 is going to be lengthy to say the least. So if I could move item C1 up to the front of the line, since it's going to take quite a bit of manpower after that. Are we okay with that?
Yes.
Then at this time, I'd like to move to item C1, a public hearing and consideration of a resolution confirming the assessments for citywide landscape and lighting assessment district zones of benefit and authorizing the city engineer to file the diagram and assessment with the auditor of the Madera County. Keith, if you would, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Council members. On an annual basis, the Engineering Department prepares a landscape maintenance districts report, or district report. This report essentially incorporates what staff knows about the revenue and expenses for the previous year and projects what they will be for the next fiscal year. For this year, it incorporates data from about a year and a half since the time that the Parks Department took over maintenance. I believe it was July 1st, 2015. Based on this information, staff then makes recommendations for adjustments in the assessments. What Council sees in this report also incorporates everything that the Parks Department has learned for each zone. They've learned a lot over the last year and a half, and that is incorporated into the engineer's report. During the May 17th Council meeting, John Scarborough elaborated on what we have learned. He is in attendance tonight if you have any other specific questions, but he will not be giving a detailed presentation tonight unless you have questions. As noted in the May 17th meeting, even as we prepared this engineer's report in accordance with past practices and utilizing our current experience, we identified what we feel are logical next steps in simplifying the management of the full 80 zones. To that end, we did recommend at the last council meeting that zones 10A through I be pulled out of any consideration for this year other than to go ahead and move the existing assessments forward the way they have been. This current report includes Council's agreement with that recommendation. Moving on, the focus of this meeting will be the Proposition 218 hearings. For those zones with the Proposition 218 hearing, the Council will consider the testimony in conjunction with the results of the ballot procedure. Where the weighted number of ballots received is in favor of the proposed assessment, Council may, in combination with the testimony received during the assessments during this meeting, may consider those that comments in the consideration of where the assessment does go ultimately. Where the ballots indicate more opposed to the assessment, the increase will be abandoned for this year, and the rates will revert to the previous year's assessment. Or the amount will be adjusted. If they are rejected, the covenants with each zone are still in place. So if there is a needed increase for the assessment, the covenant will apply, and there will be a consumer cost index plus 2%, call it cost of living adjustment applied to it. As I noted previously, the ballots received will be weighted. What does this mean? Where all the parcels have the same assessment, each parcel receives one vote. Where assessments are different from parcel to parcel, however, each dollar value of assessment receives one vote. So it's conceivable that some zones could have thousands of votes placed forward depending upon the actual cost of the assessments on that zone. If a tie is present in any of the votes, that represents a passing. It does pass. If no ballots are presented, it is also a tie, and it passes. I think that's it. If you have any questions, I would be happy to answer them.
Great, Keith. Thank you. Any questions, Mr. Helmuth, regarding this item?
I was just going to suggest, Mr. Mayor, Keith, or anyone else with staff, can you elaborate as to the community outreach that went into this particular assessment election?
We did set up neighborhood meetings. There were 3 meetings. There were 10 zones. One of the meetings only had one zone. Another had 3 and another had 6 zones. What we know coming out of the neighborhood meetings that there was no attendance at those from the public. Within the ballots that were each house received, there was a notice of the meeting. We also did have something in one of the utility buildings that said that we would be having meetings. If you were interested, please give us a call. I think I personally received 1 call. I'm not sure about the Parks Department. Beyond that, that represented the public outreach.
Thank you.
Thanks, Keith. And I know there was a few council members, Mayor Pro Tem Gallegos, as well as Councilman Hawley, that attended some of those outreach. And I'm sorry, Councilman Robinson. Attendance, was it kind of the usual, very low, would you say?
Very, 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 very low.
You're looking
Nobody,
at it.
Yeah.
no one that showed up.
Which is unfortunate.
Yeah.
I mean, we had staff prepared to answer questions and reach out and explain, but maybe they'll have another opportunity down the road. Keith, thank you very much for that.
You're welcome.
This is a notice public hearing, so at this time what I'm going to do is open the public hearing, but I'm going to ask anyone in the audience who is in favor of the annual assessments to please come forward. If there's anybody in favor of the assessments would like to speak, please come forward. Seeing none, if there's anybody against the annual assessments, please come forward. Express your concerns. Seeing none, at this time I will ask if there's anybody in the audience with ballots that they want to have counted. If they can please bring them up here to the city clerk, and we will have them counted. If not, once I close the public hearing, no other ballots will be accepted. Seeing none, I will close the public comment, and at this time, Sonia, we will take all the ballots for tabulation.
Oops. Yes, thank you, Mayor. Sorry, the microphone won't reach. But yes, we have staff available in the lobby, so we will go into the lobby, tabulate the votes, and then when we return, then you can call the item back up and we'll report on the results.
Thank you. Please thank staff for counting ballots and staying late. We really appreciate that. So at this time, I will table item C1 until all ballots are counted. A recess. We will recess with that item. We will continue with the agenda. Sonia, thank you very much. So with that, we will move back to the consent calendar. If there is a council member wishing to further discuss any particular item on the consent, Councilman Oliver.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to pull item B5 for additional discussion.
B5, of course. Mayor Pro Tem.
I'd like to pull B4, B7, and B8.
Item B4, B7, and B8. Anyone else? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar excluding items B5, B4, B7, and B8.
Mr. Mayor, I so move to approve the item with the exception of B4, B7, and B8.
B5.
And B5, excuse me.
Second.
It's been properly moved and seconded to approve those particular consent items. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Councilman Oliver, item B5.
Hi, Mr. Mayor, thank you. Item B5 is regarding a professional services agreement for a consultant to do a review of our development impact fee program. And I know that this also came out of a recent discussion several months ago regarding economic development. I just want to add additional comment, maybe some direction to staff as we move forward. I know the last time that we actually looked at impact fee increases was in 2003, and I think the last time that we studied it was in 2008 per the staff report. So I think my recommendation would be, as we move forward, assuming that we approve this contract, I would like our team to work in concert with the Economic Development Commission and our strategic partners in looking at our impact fee schedule and structure, among other fees, to ensure that as we look at the cost for service, we're also looking at how we put our best foot forward to be competitive in terms of business attraction and economic development. So that was going to be my recommendation as we move forward, assuming that item B5 passes. And that's all I really have, Mr. Mayor.
So those particular partners that obviously have maybe worked with other communities or other cities have something to add as part of a recommendation?
Sure. So maybe perhaps some folks that are from private industry or are in the development business or have worked with the City of Madera in the past, or perhaps have membership and partnership with our Economic Development Commission, which is our economic development arm for the City of Madera. I would just like some additional eyes on those numbers, and especially if they have some insight to glean as to what other communities are doing to be competitive, to attract businesses looking to locate here. I think it would be a good exercise. I think it's something that we should do more often than we do to ensure that we're being competitive. And so that was just my recommendation before moving forward.
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Oliver gave me the courtesy of a call in advance, and I absolutely concur with his recommendation. Working with our strategic partners is just good business.
Absolutely. I think similar to the RAC that we have with our CDBG funds on how they have a different insight and different views as we do, but we're trying to accomplish the same goals. I think it's a wonderful idea. Right. Great idea. Any other comments or questions regarding item B5? I think we have direction with that, Keith. I'm not sure if we need to change that in the particular motion of acceptance, or I think is that more just direction, Mr. Tooley?
Mr. Mayor, I understand the mayor's direction, and we'll carry forward.
Thank you very much.
With that, Mr. Mayor, I move to approve item B5 as presented.
A second.
It's been properly moved and seconded to approve item B5 as presented. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much for that, Councilman Oliver. Mayor Pro Tem, item B4.
I had a question about the water meter installation and the company, West Valley Construction Company. Have we used them in the past?
They actually worked the last project.
Okay, so that was my concern. We had some issues in my district in the city of them shutting off water and not letting our residents know that they were shutting off water. There was an incident where they broke a line and water was off for several hours. We're talking 5 or 6 hours, and we have some elderly that can't get to water that maybe the company or give us a call, send out some cases of water to the residents. It was the apartment complex on Granada. And this is not the first incident this has happened with this company, so I'm just making sure that they're going to be accountable to make sure our residents are informed. Supposedly they put flyers on their doors to let them know, like just a window of when the water is going to be shut off, maybe 3 or 4 days, but not all the flyers stay on the doors. So I did talk to Mr. Merchant about talking with the company about hangers, door hangers on their doors.
Yes, they were actually supposed to do that with the apartment complex, and as I understand it, there was something, I'll say, strange happened with regard to notification with the various apartments relative to the management of the company. We'll do our best to go ahead and
so if we could just stress to them that we can't have our residents without water.
Sure.
Even 2 hours is asking a lot. And so if that can they can just be aware of that. If they need us to put people on the ground to hit door to door because there's an emergency break or leak, we can go out and do that because it's important to have water. Or if they knew that they were aware of their water was going to be shut off because they didn't have they didn't have the exact day, they had a window. They had to make accommodations to go somewhere else.
Sure. We will work on that.
Thank you.
Let's take them one at a time. So if we're complete with B4, I'll accept a motion.
I'll move to approve item B4 as presented.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve item B4 as presented. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
The opposed, motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much, Keith. Item B7.
Question, dedication of land that the developer is going to give us. How much and what is that land going to be used for?
Oh, the dedication of land.
Yes.
This is for the Capistrano 16 subdivision out on Westbury. What this is basically the internal streets for the subdivision. They're giving us those streets. That includes the streets, the sidewalks, and the park strips. The city then takes ownership from them and maintains them. Also includes portions of Westbury because the city does own a portion of Westbury, but there was additional dedications for that as well. And I think those dedications actually occurred as part of the encroachment permit process. I'm trying to recall. It may be actually on the final map.
Okay, so my question is, if the developer didn't dedicate any land for like a park, pocket
No.
park or parkland?
No, they did not.
That was my question. Thank you.
Any other questions regarding item B7? If not, I'll entertain a motion for item B7.
I'll move to approve item B7 as presented.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve item B7. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. And consent calendar item B8.
I think that's great what we're doing for our management, and it said supervisors, but my question, Wendy, is are we scheduling any time for the staff? There's some issues in there. I think staff needs to have that professional development in their capacity.
There is no limit on who can attend. It's open to any employee. We put the announcements out to all the departments, and it's up to them to sign up. So we also put it in our HR department has a weekly newsletter when we have upcoming training. We also include it in there. So anywhere they see it, if they want to attend, they do have to get permission from their supervisor because they will be away from work, but it is open to everyone.
Okay, so it's volunteer to go to this training?
Generally volunteer. There are times when we, being in HR, have suggestions for certain people to attend certain topics.
Because I think all our employees would benefit for this. I mean, we're looking at employees and driving issues regarding drug and alcohol in the workplace, fair labor standards, workplace bullying, discipline, and harassment. I mean, you just go down the list. It's something that all our employees need that information for, I think.
Through the chair, Mayor Pro Tem, thought I had the mic off. I'm sorry. Yes, we do want to make sure that all of our employees receive appropriate training. This contract, in fact, captures some of our mandatory training, but encouragement and direction is provided to employees to attend various trainings throughout the year. So thank you for that observation.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Councilman Oliver.
Just had a quick question regarding the topics that are listed here. Is this a part of our selection, or is this what Liebert Cassidy is providing during this upcoming year?
So Liebert Cassidy has actually a very broad catalog of topics that they will cover. All of the members of the consortium come together once a year, generally April, and we all have a vote. It's an equal vote. So each agency gets one vote, and then whichever topics get the most votes become the consortiums for the year.
Great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions regarding item B8? Thank you for that. Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move to approve item B8 as presented.
Second.
Item B8 has been properly moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Moving on to item C2, a public hearing and consideration of introduction of an ordinance amending Section 5-5.13 of Chapter 5 of Title 5 of the Madera Municipal Code pertaining to watering restrictions. Mr. Randall.
Thank you. We brought this back at the council's direction from our last meeting. It simply amends the ordinance to allow the council by a resolution to adopt a new level B that would allow watering 3 days a week. Pretty limited and pretty straightforward. Glad to answer any questions.
Thank you, Dave. Any questions, Mr. Randall?
Mr. Mayor, I think just for the record, Dave, can you elaborate once again as to the planned maintenance and improvements that are going to be ongoing during the next several months to increase our capacity? We discussed that to great length during the last meeting, and we were pretty confident that
We have two major repairs that are underway that will add to our capacity to provide water. One is well 20, and it's located on Gateway. It is out of the ground right now, and the repairs are being completed, and hopefully we'll be back in the ground in the next 45 days.
Sorry.
State your name.
So what I said, yeah, all that was good. So it's so that well will be completed, and hopefully at that time we'll figure out how much more capacity we get out of it. We're hoping to get somewhere in the neighborhood of 800 GPM out of it. Well 27 is a well that, because of nitrate issues, was thought that we wouldn't be able to use it. We did finally a way to deal with those issues, but it requires some improvements. The timing on that's a little more difficult because it's dependent upon getting permits from the Union Pacific Railroad for boring under the tracks for a discharge line to get the nitrates out of the system when we flush our granular activated carbon filters, which are on that system. It's a really hard one to say, but we're hoping it's going to be 4 months. It could, though, run 6 or 9, depending on what happens, the contractors and some other things. It's a much more complex thing. We also have to go through a process with the water board and certifying some of the equipment, new equipment we installed. So, but we're hoping for a 4-month startup date.
Great. Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Mayor Dillon, is this a time I can talk about water increases in the water bills?
Water rates?
Yeah, water rates. To Mr. Randall?
Would defer to Mr. Richardson.
I would say that's probably off topic since this is just strictly under
Okay.
an ordinance that's changing it. If you'd like, I mean, you can bring it back
Okay,
for
thank you.
separate meeting. Thanks.
Any other questions regarding item C2? Councilman Rodriguez.
Yes, and at this point, if we move forward on this ordinance, at what time can you bring a report back to the council in regards to like the usage of water, how we're doing as a city in general? Is that something that we see on our agenda that you put every meeting?
You do see the water
we have
conservation report.
Yes.
We can probably add, what we'll probably do is add some information on our capacity if there's some additional information that will give you a little more perspective on this issue. We'll be glad to do that to make the picture a little more clear for everybody.
Yeah, and only because you had brought up that that point on the last meeting there that you had a concern about possibly capacity. So that would be a good idea for us to have.
Be glad to do it.
We have your conservation report every meeting. This would be something you can either add to it or have a separate one. Councilman Robinson.
Yes, 3 days a week, hot summer days, and then convert back to 2 days later in the winter.
It stays in place until such time as the council takes another action. You pass another resolution, either going more lenient or more restrictive. That's at your pleasure.
But we do need like 7 times the amount of rain we got this year in order to replenish the aquifers.
Now, in the past, didn't we have certain times of the year that, was it October, that we actually went back to lesser days, and then we reassessed after the winter in around April or so?
Generally, we've done that. We've tried to look for actually doing, when we're just trying to save water, not worrying about peak demand issues.
Right.
We were trying to ask people to turn off their sprinklers in the wintertime, and so we would try to restrict the water. And again, if you so desire, when you pass that resolution, you can give us that direction, and we will, reassess it if you want at a particular date and time. We're glad to implement any of the schemes the council so desires.
Normally, I would think that would be prudent, but I think if we made it another public agenda item where we reminded everybody that we are now going to be switching from 3 days to 2 days, that might work out better. So. Yeah. Maybe we leave it as is for now, and we come back in September for an October meeting date.
Yeah. Mr. Mayor, if I may offer a suggestion.
Of course.
The water crisis is far from over.
Right.
Particularly with regard to the aquifer, the groundwater tables. My experience is that the usage tends to take care of itself during the cooler months. And so making a change from 3 days to 2 is probably a redundant kind of exercise. Well, perhaps I'll stop there, and I think there's an opportunity for some additional discussion this evening about water rates, and perhaps we could do that under council reports, and I could provide some feedback.
That was going to be my suggestion to Mayor Pro Tem, that if we can have that discussion during council reports. And since we are increasing from 2 days to 3 days, I'm not sure Water Patrol on how that works out with our employees. Is this something that we are going to have to hire additional people or use existing people, just an additional couple of days?
Same staff. They just have different people to look at on different days. We will Again, a lot of the staff are working on other meter issues and encouraging conservation. Of course, we're more about education than we are enforcement.
Got it. Councilman Rodriguez.
Yes, and David, you just sparked up a question there as far as the redundancy. So in our current ordinance, do we have a section whereby it'll state that during the summertime, maybe the 3 days, and come these times in the wintertime, we then would fall back under 2? Do we send out any type of notice? Or is that something that can be added to an ordinance?
To the chair, council member, it's something we could do, but if the council is comfortable 3 days a week, and we're comfortable as an organization that it doesn't put us in any jeopardy, I think your interests are not served by switching back and forth between 2 and 3 days. My recommendation would be keep it at 3 days, and people will self-regulate their use of water. I cut my water back dramatically during the fall and winter of the year because growing season is past. As we say, don't kick open an open door.
And I agree. Usually it does take care of itself. I just didn't know if we had to put it in tonight's agenda or come back with another agenda item. And I get the redundancy, Mr. Tooley. That would be something we'd have to open again and do it all over again in September, October. I just thought the use of being live streamed and including our constituents with that remember to conserve might be appropriate.
Well, and Mayor, just if I might add a little clarification as far as the switching back mechanism, it's the way the ordinance is structured currently, and the reason we had to put this in there was that it's set up to where the council declares by resolution which restriction level they want. Unfortunately, we didn't have this level, so we've had to add it in.
Okay.
So it is currently it's set up where you basically have to push the right button every time and on a separate action. So.
Thank you for that. Mayor Pro Tem.
I'm not sure Mr. Randall can answer this question, but there's somebody who can in the audience. If we're going to approve the 3 days watering, does that include our medium islands and our parks to go 3 days to water so that our town's looking a little bit more greener and livable for our residents?
It does, and we already have a provision that allows us to make exceptions for parks and public spaces as needed. So that's something we've always had that ability to make sure that we have the capacity to provide that service.
So on our islands, are we taking off the drip and going to sprinklers now so that we're covering the whole island and not just the trees?
Well, I would have to let Parks address that.
Through the chair, council member, if I recall correctly, and I'd ask John to confirm, I think the state restriction on watering in medians is still in place. So there is no ability, if I'm correct, John?
Talking to the mic.
Because we have a lot of...
Yeah, let me get John on record here and get him a microphone, please.
While John walks up, I don't think we have the ability to water in the median areas. I think that restriction still exists at the state level. Now, within our rate structure right now, there is a conservation element that's available for citizens first, and to the extent that it's not used, we can then use it for city conservation projects. Obviously, the median strips is going to be a prime target.
Well, because in our neighborhood watch, I'm sure my other colleagues have heard, our residents aren't happy about it looking dead in their neighborhoods.
I don't think any of us are, but again, John, correct, if I'm wrong, please tell me, but I think the restriction from the state is still in place.
Yes, you're right on the mark. Our feeling is that particularly as late in the summer as it is, we would get limited benefit. As David had said, we can't do it anyway. But the big expensive infrastructure, the trees, the things that are very, very difficult to replace, and in some instances almost impossible where we have 50 and 60-year-old trees. They all seem to be doing really well. I personally drive the neighborhoods, and with that being said, we believe that the additional day will help us considerably, and what we would recommend, particularly in light of the restrictions with the law, is just to kind of sit back this summer, let's see what this next winter brings. Hopefully there's it's kind of a mixed bag, honestly. I say hopefully there's a relaxation of the ordinance, and then we can go back to sprinklers frankly, I don't know that that's the direction that we want to go in long term. We may want to, in the future, look towards just eliminating the brown turf and doing something different in its place. Maybe doing xeriscaping like we see on 4th Street or something of that nature. Keep in mind that that's a relatively big project and will require some planning and a lot of staff time and that kind of thing. But long term, that's probably the smarter direction to go in.
Again, through the chair, so we're crystal clear, the restriction is on turf in the medians.
Turf in the medians.
We will continue to maintain our investment in major assets like the trees. And after that, I think it comes down to what's our best available alternative.
It's really hard to explain that to residents that look out their window and they say, it looks like I live in Parkwood. It's really hard to tell residents when they're like, why do I need to stay in Madera? We don't, it's not nice here, I'm going to move. You go to Clovis, it's green. You go to Fresno, it's green. You go to Kerman, it's green. And we come to Madera and we see what we see. And I try to explain that, but it's very difficult for our residents to see that. And I love Madera, and I want people to stay here. I want people to invest. But it's really hard to sell it, especially our realtors have had expressed some concerns because when they're taking people around our town to buy here that have now invested here, they're like, I think we're going to stay in Fresno. We're going to buy something in Fresno instead. And that's my concern with my constituents that are really, I've gotten emails, I can't tell you how many, phone calls. I got bitten by mosquitoes a day talking to residents who said, I'm going to let it all die, I'm done. I mean, if this outside looks like this, why do I want to make my house look nice? I mean, they're just frustrated, and I get that left and right, and I try to be compassionate and tell them the history that we have and the laws and what we need to do, but it's really hard to look outside to see that.
With Chair, Council Member, I think we share your frustration. Perhaps this might be one of those instances where we try to use our relationship with the League of Cities to get some relief out of Sacramento. That's the only suggestion I can provide at this time.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Councilman Robinson.
Yes, I was wondering, are farmers, are they using surface water now? Because I see the irrigation canals, they're full.
Mm-hmm.
And, like when I came up from the Bay Area, from L.A., I saw King River is about almost flooding over the banks.
I can answer that. I met with Mr. LaQuashi, who said that they're training their farmers to use irrigation water and not so much pumping from our groundwater. So they're trying to re-educate our young farmers to do that, which is going to take time, to take it from the canal and not pump it from the ground from their wells. So it's a process.
And I think I can add a little to the Mayor Pro Tem's discussion. I spoke to someone who is prominent in the ag community recently. MID is selling their water at about $95 an acre foot this year. To pump out of the ground, you're generally looking at between $85 and $110 an acre foot. So that transition that the Mayor Pro Tem is talking about and moving people to surface water, in some instances, there's going to be some economic benefit, but it's also going to be a learning curve.
Yeah,
it is.
Business decision. I'm sorry, Linda. Did you? If you would come to the podium, though, please, and I do need to get you on record. Name, address, phone number, favorite color, all of that.
No, I just have a question in that.
Name and address, please.
Linda Hatfield, 1406 Jennings.
Thank you.
The question I have is, Clovis and Fresno are in the state of California as well. So how are they watering their meridians and we're not? And for people who live, say, on Acanero, which is near me, they're assessed to have that strip through their street. Are they not participating in some way financially to maintain that strip? Because the sidewalks crack, the tree roots are under it, and it's not as pleasant as it could be. Just a question.
Yeah,
I think Clovis, don't they have they use gray water?
I couldn't tell you about Fresno or Clovis, but I would like to hear from Mr. Tooley.
I have a limited answer. I'm not thoroughly familiar with what Clovis and Fresno is doing. I know Fresno has surface water rights, but I believe that their restrictions with regard to medians would exactly mirror those in Madera, so I don't know how they're doing it. I am aware that there's a reclamation plant in Clovis. I do know that they make use of, your term is correct, gray water, partially treated water for their irrigation purposes, but I don't know to what extent that, how far those purple pipes go. If anyone can add to that conversation.
Sure.
I think Clovis had a like $10 or $15 million investment in their recycling plant, and that's
correct.
I know they're making good use of that gray water. You're nodding your head. Well, I'm hoping you're going to bail me out.
I think years ago, maybe a couple decades ago, City of Clovis invested greatly in their water infrastructure, and I believe they have access to anywhere from 12 to 15,000 acre-feet of water, and the City of Fresno has access to a little over 100,000 acre-feet of water, and now trying to realize that and have invested in almost $500 million worth of infrastructure investments over time. But just kind of circling back to the discussion, from what I recall, I think in April of 2017 when the governor lifted the state of emergency, it was still under the purview of the Water Resources Board that would require cities or municipalities and some of those restrictions, including the watering of median islands. So I think for this discussion, maybe it's something that we can bring back. We should both identify and understand what the facts are. So that might be one of them. So I would encourage that we confer with our League of Cities partners to make sure that be the case, because if it's not, it would definitely change my thought process. And two, that we just continue to follow the data. We've made significant investments in our water meter program. Residents now have the ability to track their water usage in real time on their smartphone, which is something that we heavily stressed back in 2015. So I appreciate staff for delivering on that enhancement. So I think we should continue to follow those facts and the data, look at what our neighbors are doing in the region. Going back to 2015, I remember pulling up the per capita usage of Maderans compared to the 8-county Central Valley region. Even during years when we had unlimited days, Maderans were still stewards of the water supply. And in most instances, we had a lesser water usage per capita than most cities and counties. So with that, I know we have some additional comments. I think I know where we should go on this item, but that's all the comments I have to add at this time.
Thank you very much for that. Councilman Hawley.
Yes, I just had a question, and it concerns, and I hear this every year. Are schools under the same guidelines that the city's under?
Yes, they are. They have the same requirements.
Same hours of watering?
Same hours of watering. We do have the ability to give them exceptions where there's needs, because sometimes schools like the city's irrigation system, they're so vast that they can't get through all the stations in one day, so you have to give them more time. So we make exceptions where they're warranted, and for the most part, they haven't even asked for those. Sometimes they forget a little bit. I wouldn't say they're perfect, but they most certainly have tried. They're good partners. They do try to conserve water.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Rodriguez.
Yeah, just circling around the amendment and maybe the ordinance, are there any provisions on that ordinance that allow, especially for these median islands, like a drip, maybe longer time of a drip? I think you had brought that up the last discussion, where we could potentially increase the amount of drip, and it doesn't really take up that much water and capacity throughout the week, or for this for the purpose of this conversation, maybe the month or what have you. But is that something that's allowable?
It most certainly is. You can be drafted in any way. The current ordinance just addresses the days a week for the council's direction. If you want us to amend it, we most certainly could.
And that might be something like Councilman Oliver had mentioned, and also our mayor, that we might want to bring this back with more information, possibly for the council to discuss, and possibly add these amendments to the ordinance as well. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. Any other questions? Seeing none, I will ask for title. I'm sorry, before I do that, is there anyone else in the public wishing to speak on this particular item? Seeing none, I'll close the public comment and now ask for title.
Introduction of an ordinance amending Section 5-5.13 of Chapter 5 of Title 5 of the Madera Municipal Code pertaining to watering restrictions.
Mr. Mayor, given the planned improvements and maintenance upgrades to reach additional capacity within the next several months, I move to waive further reading and introduce item C2 as presented.
Second.
It's been properly moved and seconded to waive further reading and introduce the ordinance. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimous. Thank you very much for that. Moving on to item C3, this is a second reading and consideration of adoption of an ordinance rezoning property located in proximity to the northwest corner of Yosemite Avenue and North K Street. Mr. Boyle.
Thank you, Mayor Medellin, Chair, Council. The third item on tonight's public hearing agenda is indeed a rezone of 3 parcels that are located near the intersection of K and West Yosemite. As a refresher, the Planning Commission forwarded a recommendation for adoption from their June public hearings. The item was introduced earlier this month. Staff and the Planning Commission will continue to recommend approval. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Mr. Boyle. There was a gentleman here at the first reading that had some questions or concerns. Just out of curiosity, did you have a chance to sit down with him and address those concerns?
I met with him just yesterday. We spent an hour of time looking at the development potential of his parcel. He may entertain a rezone to a higher density to better match with the high-density apartment complex immediately adjacent to his property. If he'd like to do so, you may see an item before you in the near future.
Great. Thank you very much for that. I appreciate that. Any other questions of Chris? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I will ask for title.
Adoption of an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Madera amending the official City of Madera zoning map to rezone approximately 30,000 square feet of property located at 601 and 609 West Yosemite Avenue and 110 North K Street in proximity to the intersection of West Yosemite Avenue and North K Street from the R1 Low Density Residential Zone District to the West Yosemite Professional Office Zone District.
Mr. Mayor, I move to waive further reading and adopt.
Second.
It's been properly moved and seconded to waive further reading and adopt item C3 as presented. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much for that. All right. It seems like you arrived just in time. So recess is over for item C1. Okay, if we can reconvene with item C1.
Okay, thank you,
Tony, if
Mayor.
you would, please.
We have completed the ballot count, and right now what I'd like to do is read the results. There were 10 zones where ballots were sent out. And what I'll do is I'll read the total number of yes votes, total number of no votes, then I'll indicate whether it's a pass or fail. For Zone 1, yes votes 2,237, no votes 500, pass. Zone 7, 14 yes votes, 24 no votes, fail. Zone 9, 1 yes vote, 7 no votes, fail. Zone 15, 1 yes vote, 1 no vote, pass. Zone 15B, 1 yes vote, 1 no vote, pass. Zone 16, 4 yes votes, 2 no votes, pass. Zone 20C, 3 yes votes, 3 no votes, pass. Zone 26, 3 yes votes, 4 no votes, fail. Zone 26D, 0 yes votes, 3 no votes, fail. Zone 36B, 0 yes votes, 10 no votes, fail. And that completes the ballot count. At this time, I can either turn it back over to our city engineer in case you have other questions, or I think he would request then that you consider the resolution before you.
Thank you very much, Sonia. I will ask if there are any further questions of Keith or Sonia, for that matter, regarding this item. If not, I will entertain a motion approving the ballots.
Actually, it would be to approve the resolution, which will have the ballot information on it, to get technical.
So the resolution, if you will.
Mr. Mayor, I will move to approve the resolution in item C1.
Second.
It's been properly moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. And once again, Sonia, to you and to all your staff for counting those large number of ballots, we thank you all very, very much for doing so. Moving on to item, item C4. This is a public hearing in consideration of a resolution of the City Council of the City of Madera confirming weed abatement report. Favela.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. On June 19, 2017, weed abatement re-inspections were conducted on 23 vacant lots. Such parcels were found in violation of weed abatement ordinance. At the time, 5 properties remained in violation. Exhibit A. At the time, property owners were contacted one final time through telephone to inform them of the existing violation and upcoming abatement set for June 23rd. 2 property owners were successfully contacted and did not have any interest in bringing their properties into compliance. They agreed to the abatement and the costs. Abatements were conducted on June 23rd by a local contractor. By then, all weeds on the respective properties were well over 4 feet tall and had the potential to become a fire hazard. All proper steps were taken to notify the affected property owners by certified mail of the proposed weed abatement action on their respective properties. The weed abatement assessment report was posted at City Hall on July 7th, and at which date notices of cost recovery were mailed through certified mail. The notice of cost recovery indicated the violation, due date, amount due, which includes the contractor fee along with the administrative fee, and the date, time, and location of tonight's hearing. All charges incurred by the City of Madera for the weed abatement services will be included as a special assessment on bills for property taxes levied against the respective lots. With that being said, staff recommends that City Council hold a public hearing to hear and consider any objections from the affected property owners of the proposed assessments related to the completed weed abatement work and adopt the attached resolution confirming the report and ordering abatement cost to be a special assessment. Any questions?
Thank you, Favela. Any questions of Favela regarding this report? With weed abatement, it's not limited to just weeds, excessive shrubbery, trees, things of that nature?
Yes.
And so they're also responsible for that as well, right?
Yes, they are.
Okay. Thank you very much. This is a notice public hearing, so I will ask if there's anybody in the audience wishing to speak on this particular item. Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing and bring it back to the council for any further discussion or action.
I'll move to approve item C5 as presented, Mr. Mayor.
Second.
C4.
Oh, C4. Whoop, I'm looking at Measure T. Sorry.
That's all
Item
right.
C4.
We'll get there. It's been properly moved and seconded to approve item C4 as presented. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Favela, for that. Thank you for your diligence with weed abatement. Item C5, another notice public hearing and consideration of a resolution approving the Measure T annual expenditure plan for 2017-18.
Thank you, Mayor, council members. The purpose of this item is to allow for public review and comment of the proposed projects and expenditures within the Measure T funding program prior to approval by the City Council. This public review and comment opportunity is required in the Measure T strategic program or plan adopted by the Madera County Transportation Authority. Each year, the 3 local agencies, that's the county, Chowchilla, and the City of Madera, must prepare and approve an annual expenditure plan, or AEP for short. That's done prior to approval by the MCTA. The MCTA will then consider the local agency plans into their annual work program and authorize the expenditure of funds. The source of funding for Measure T is the local 1/2 cent sales tax approved by voters in November 2006. I think the report actually says 2007, as I recall. I've been saying this for a few years this way. This funding source will be available for 20 years through November 2027. The funds must be used for transportation projects and programs. The Measure T program or funds are distributed to 5 programs as required in the voter-approved investment program or plan. The programs are a regional transportation program, which gets 51% of the funding. Local transportation program, 44%. Public transportation program, 2%. Environmental enhancement program, 2%. And then administration and planning, which is 1%. The funding for these programs is further distributed to 10 specific program categories, of which 8 of these programs are under the discretion of the local agency. These programs are regional 3R. The 3R stands for rehabilitate, resurface, and reconstruction of roads. Street maintenance, supplemental street maintenance, flexible projects, ADA compliance, transit enhancement, ADA seniors and paratransit, and then environmental enhancement program. Funding for these programs this year totals $2,867,000 rounded. Last year is at $2,830,000. It's about $36,000 more than last year. And just for grins, I looked back 2 years. It's about $100,000 more than 2 years ago. So it looks like the taxes have increased at a reasonable clip over the last couple of years or so. This concludes my presentation. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Keith, very much. Any questions? Mr. Helmuth? Got off easy. Keith? Thank you very much for that. This is a notice public hearing, so I will ask if there's anybody in the audience wishing to speak regarding this particular item. Please come forward. Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing, bring it back to the council for their wise decision.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to approve item C5.
Second.
It's been properly moved and seconded to approve item C5 as presented. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much for that. Moving on to admin reports. Item E1 is consideration of a request to designate a voting delegate and alternate for the League of California Cities. Sonia.
Thank you, Mayor. The League of California Cities annual conference is scheduled in September in Sacramento, and they have sent us some correspondence requesting that we designate a council member to serve as a voting member during their annual business meeting. As of the writing of this report, Councilmember Robinson is the only council member registered to attend, and it does have to be someone that's registered. So we would request that you designate him as the voting member. You have the option of naming an alternate, but they would also have to be registered for the event.
Of course. And Councilman Robinson has done a fantastic job as our league representative, so that would certainly be our best choice. And we thank you for your service at the league, Derek. I know it takes a lot of time.
Thank you.
And are you suggesting we need an alternate?
No, that's entirely up to the council. If somebody else was planning on attending, then...
Well, just for the record, I did speak with Councilman Rigby before he left, and he showed interest in possibly attending the league. I know he hasn't registered yet, but I would like to see on record that if we need that alternate, or if he does register, that he would be the alternate.
Okay, sounds good.
Thank you very much for that, Sonia. Thank you. Item E2 is discussion and direction on the Friends of Madera Animal Shelter request for funding.
And there really is no report on that. It's just brought back at council's request.
I appreciate that, and I don't know if there's anybody here in the audience that are representing the FMAS. I know we've had this discussion a few times before, and I would like to say firsthand that the Friends of the Madera Animal Shelter do such a wonderful job in the city of Madera. They raise a lot of money, over $300,000. Their volunteer time, they use their own money, they use their own homes to spay and neuter and get stray dogs off the streets. And again, they do such a fantastic job, and they do it with passion. And the city of Madera certainly is far better off with their assistance. But personally, one, setting precedent in giving money to a nonprofit organization is difficult for me personally to do. especially in our budget crunch time. As we all know, for the last 4 or 5 months, we've been plugging holes, and we had a 7-figure deficit we had to overcome. And $100,000 annually is a lot of money. It's a police officer. It's a couple of 2 or 3 parks employees. And so I would like to continue to work with the Friends of the Madera Animal Shelter. I know that as part of their request, they are asking things like additional animal control. So I'm not sure if we have filled our required positions or where we are with animal control. Also with things like education. I know we can use our city websites possibly or assist them with videos and things of that nature to remind people to take advantage of their monthly vaccinations and things like that they have here at the fairgrounds. And so that's my direction to the council, and I'm not sure if there's any additional input. I will ask Mayor Pro Tem to chime in.
I know we're budget cuts right now and we're crunching numbers, but come December, if we're looking good and everything looks like we're on target and maybe a couple of dollars ahead, I'm not saying reach out and give them $100,000, but something small to show that we appreciate what they do. Most of the animals they do take care of are our city animals here. It's not something they have to do. They choose to do that for us. If we had to pay somebody to do it, it'd be very costly. If they didn't do what they did, our animal control officer would be not 1 but probably 5, because we'd have animals going all over crazy in our city. And of course, they'll call our department. Our department will be overwhelmed with phone calls, and we'll be getting the emails and we'll get the phone calls. So I'm not suggesting $100,000, but something come maybe December, we look at the budget and see where we're at.
That's a point well taken and a great suggestion. And again, if it is certainly not based on the type of work they do. They do it with passion, and they care about the city of Madera. For me personally, it boils down to a financial business decision.
Right.
Thank you for that input. Councilman Oliver.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think both you and Mayor Pro Tem Gallegos make excellent points, and I too appreciate the Friends of the Madera Animal Shelter for all that they do, and as you've mentioned before, opening their homes and their hearts to our, in service to our community. I think what we do know is that without their efforts, it would be very well apparent. And we're fortunate in that, they're out there working very hard, and especially, through their spay and neuter program. I had a question with regard to our community development block grant program. Obviously, this is something that we go through once a year. We do it with the assistance of a review and advisory committee that evaluates proposals from agencies and organizations beyond city government. I wanted to ask the question, obviously I know that we cannot predetermine eligibility or favor in the application process, but I wanted to ask the question of staff if, based on the business plan that we've been presented by this agency, the pro forma that they've provided us, their mission statement and their objectives, if there's an angle to meeting one of the 3 definitions that HUD provides in allocating CDBG dollars, and I think it's whether or not it will impact or benefit low to moderate income persons, whether it will aid in the prevention in slum or blight, and whether or not it meets an urgent need. My initial inclination sounds as if there is an argument to be made in all 3 categories, so I wanted to ask the question either to Vet or Mr. Tooley, if anyone can maybe try to, I know we can't, provide any definitive terms, but maybe just provide some frame of references to that process and when that opportunity might be to apply.
Through the chair, I think I'd like to yield that question to Yvette. She can be more precise than I can.
Okay.
Okay. Well, any organization or member of the community can participate in our CDBG funding process. We do post notices for public hearings and community meetings when we start a grant cycle. So they will be made aware of that. They can express their needs and their concerns. They will most likely be able to qualify under meeting a particular urgent community development need. because the city has already identified their priorities for low-income and moderate-income persons, as well as addressing slums or blight. That has already been approved by our 5-year consolidated plan, approved by HUD, so they're looking for us to address those priorities. Again, they could make a case for meeting a particular urgent community development need that is impacting the community.
Okay.
And affects their health and welfare, public welfare.
Thank you, Yvette. I know in years past there have been instances where, especially our nonprofit organizations who aren't as familiar in this process and may not have the staff resource necessarily to apply for a number of different grants, do you think it'd be possible for us to engage some representatives with HUD to maybe as a primer, or hey, we have an agency that perhaps, let's say they express interest in this application and grant. Would that be possible to maybe pick up the phone?
Absolutely. We can definitely get some information ahead of time and share that with you and with them.
I think that would be a good thing to do. I think that they have presented us a really great business plan and certainly have demonstrated the need and demonstrated all that they're capable of doing. And so I would encourage that conversation if we can follow up with them on that.
Definitely. Will do.
Councilman Hawley.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. First, I'd like to ask the chief to come up. I have a couple questions I'd like to ask on. You sitting back there so comfortable. I don't want you to feel left out. Chief, what does our city provide to the animal shelter for spade and neutering or licensing?
What do we provide them?
Yes.
Animals?
I mean, is there a dollar amount that we contribute to them?
We pay for the housing of the animals that we deposit there at the shelter. That's our responsibility. If an animal is injured, we're required by law to provide care for that animal before we take them to the shelter. All of that is the city's cost. And before an animal is picked up, if someone claims the animal, then it is spayed and neutered at the owner's expense.
Okay. So, otherwise, my question is, we do contribute dollars,
yes, we do,
money to the shelter.
We were, up until this year, contributing $175,000 to them. We have reduced that, and we'll be paying the actual expense, which we estimate to be about $60,000 to $80,000.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Any other questions or comments regarding this item? I would like to add that I will personally reach out to the Friends of the Madera Animal Shelter after this evening and make introductions to our grants department and see what other avenues we could find to possibly help their plight.
I wanted to share that we did meet with Velvet from the organization and offered some grant support and also led them to some resources that could potentially help them. So we are going to be offering our support in writing a grant or two with them.
Okay. Thank you so much, Yvette. Moving on to item E3, a request to appoint council representatives to attend the Madera Association of Realtors Symposium. Trifecta, Sonia.
Thank you, Mayor. Again, this is an item being brought back at council's request. The Madera Realtors Association sent an invitation to the City Council inviting them to attend their symposium scheduled August 10th. And at the last meeting, council directed staff to bring the item back to make an appointment of council members to attend as representatives of the city. And that's mostly so that we avoid any Brown Act issues.
Right. Thank you. I myself attended the first one. As a matter of fact, I think maybe all but one of us were in attendance. And so on that particular day, I am not available. So maybe by the green lights here in front of me, I'll go one by one and see who is available. Whoever's quickest to the draw. We'll start with Mayor Pro Tem.
I already responded that I'm not available. It's during, I'm back to school and I have professional development on that day.
Councilman Oliver.
I'm pretty sure I'm available, and I'd like to volunteer myself to participate.
Wonderful. Councilman Rodriguez.
Yes, and I'd like to volunteer as well.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for that. Anybody else? Councilman Rigby is not here. He may have already expressed his concern, but we have no more than 3. So I will remind council that we have 2 volunteers already, and as soon as we find out who that third is, maybe via email, Sonia, you can let the rest of the council know.
That'll be fine. I'll follow up with an email to everybody as a reminder.
Great. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you.
Thank you to my colleagues for your participation in that symposium. It's eye-opening, a lot of great information.
Mm-hmm.
Council reports. Councilman Robinson.
Yes. On the 15th, I attended South Merced mural unveiling at Sam's Cafe. It showed diversity and unity. We had Maderan students as well as Merced and Chowchilla, Atwater, and they was happy to see a councilman from Madera there. Very nice.
Facebook. Very good. Yeah.
Yes.
Is that it?
Well, also, they had, plenty of food there and entertainment, and it's good that I was there so we can reach out to our constituents, our students, as well as other officials.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much for that. Mayor Pro Tem.
I attended our Commissioner ADA meeting, and it was wonderfully organized. I have to say that they're working on getting some ADA requirements into the post office. We've had it look the same forever, and we have some issues there with the doors that are really heavy and drop-off box. Just a couple of things that our ADA Commission wants some changes. We had our postmaster here that came and did some response with them, back and forth dialogue, and hopefully we can get something done there at our post office. I also went to the transit meeting and got great information. We saw the presentation at our last meeting. So they talked about getting a mascot for part of their branding and ticket pricing that Yvette was real concerned about, having several different ticket packages. I also learned that the chair at that time has been with ADA 40 years. So if we can get with Sonia and maybe get her here to recognize her for her 40 years of service in that capacity, which is amazing. And today was her last meeting and her last day. She just announced it, and everybody was like, what? So I was glad to have shared that moment with her. And now I'd like to share the moment. I've been on council a year, and I'd like to thank my colleagues here and staff for doing all that they do for our city. And I've enjoyed my first year, and I love it. So I appreciate all the support and guidance throughout this year as a city council person. Thank you.
Went by fast, didn't it?
Yes.
Congratulations. Councilman Hawley.
Oh, yeah. Wow. Thanks for all that. You did a good job in the year. Just to let everyone know, still movies in the park every Friday. City's doing a good job, good movies. Good participation out there. I just love that part of it, sitting out there, taking my family. Also, as part of the Boy Scouts, I'm also a membership chairman for the Boy Scouts, and I had a chance to go up to Shaver Lake last Friday for a dedication of a new dining hall that they built for the Boy Scouts. The old one they had only housed where they can feed up to 400 kids, so they had to do it in 2 sessions. But this one that they built, oh man, it's way up there and set out. Biggest building I ever seen for a dining hall. It'll hold over 800 kids at one time. And it sets right off the lake up at Chewani Park. Getting up in there is nice, scary, but it's nice. So it was good to see that. A lot of Boy Scouts up there doing a lot of different things and showing their leadership. So I think it's something that anybody go up to that camp would love to see it, just to drive up in there and look at it. Other than that, that's all I have.
Thank you, Councilman Hawley. Councilman Rodriguez.
Nothing to report, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilman Oliver.
Mr. Mayor, I had the opportunity to join Mayor Pro Tem Gallegos at the Jennings Street Neighborhood Watch meeting yesterday, right?
Yes.
Yesterday evening.
Yes.
This particular Neighborhood Watch team marks the 80th neighborhood to gather and organize with this program. It was a great discussion. I think what I like about it is that the residents didn't necessarily gather because of a crime occurring in the neighborhood, or they just did it because they thought it was the right thing to do. They wanted to get to know their neighbors. So I think that's really the end game there, is to organize folks before crime's able to occur. I have to just recognize Officer Hill in his demeanor and engagement with the residents. All of our officers do a really terrific job in working with our neighborhood watch teams, but I just wanted to commend him on his work as well.
That's fantastic. 80 neighborhoods.
Yeah,
that's fantastic. And speaking of Neighborhood Watch, Tuesday, August 1st is National Night Out. Hope to see everybody out and participating. And a couple of days after that will be our first annual. Did you come up with the catchy name yet, Chief?
Yeah, they did. They're calling it National Night Out Connect.
Connect. Free food. I understand a helicopter will be flying in. There'll be canine demonstrations, dunk tanks, things of that nature.
Did I hear correct that Chief Frazier's in the dunk tank? No, that's what I heard. I think the mayor should volunteer.
Dino says no. He's got my back. I will go in right after the chief goes in.
Oh, the chief is going in.
That's my challenge. Well, we're looking forward to a great community event. It may be a line to get in. Well, we're looking forward to it, and thank you for all your hard work on that. And I have nothing else to report. So thank you, everybody, for attending this evening, and I will ask Mr. Richardson to make an announcement.
Yes, Mayor. The council will now adjourn to closed session in one item, conference with real property negotiators pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.8. The property and negotiators information is as listed on the agenda.
Thank you. Everyone have a good evening.
find out, that.
Mr. Richardson.
Okay, Mayor, the council adjourned to closed session in one item, that's conference with real property negotiators pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.8, and no reportable action was taken.
Thank you very much for that, and again, thank you to my colleagues for your insight and input. Meeting adjourned.